and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shujar, and these are the headlines. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan attaches great importance to its relations with Russia as a key foreign policy priority. Meeting Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Islamabad, Khan hailed Russia's efforts for Afghan peace and reiterated call for a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. In his meeting with Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa, Lavrov acknowledged Pakistan's efforts for peace in the region, particularly Afghanistan. The Army Chief said Pakistan has no hostile designs towards any country and will keep on working towards a regional framework based on mutual progress. In Myanmar, at least 8 anti-coup protesters have been shot dead and 20 others wounded by security forces in Sagaing region. According to a local advocacy group, 590 civilians have been killed in the violence following the February 1st coup. Meanwhile, Indonesia has said the UK will also support ASEAN in its effort to resolve the Myanmar crisis. Iran has confirmed an attack on its cargo ship in the Red Sea, suspected to have been carried out by Israel. A spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry said the explosion occurred on Tuesday and caused minor damage with no casualties. Brazil has recorded more than 4,000 daily COVID-19 related deaths for the first time as its toll approaches 337,000. India has reported 630 deaths and this year's highest infections as over 115,000 people tested positive overnight. In Pakistan, 102 people have lost their lives while more than 4,000 tested positive over the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.8 million lives and infected over 132 million more. For more news in detail, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan attaches great importance to its relations with Russia as a key foreign policy priority. He was speaking to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who called on him in Islamabad. It was the first time a Russian foreign minister visited Pakistan in 9 years and comes at a crucial time for Afghanistan, with peace talks making little progress. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived on a 2-day official visit in Islamabad on Tuesday, where he was received by his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. In his meeting with Qureshi, Lavrov said Moscow and Islamabad would boost ties in the fight against terrorism, with Russia providing military equipment to Pakistan and the two holding joint exercises at sea and in the mountains. They also discussed economic relations, energy and counterterrorism cooperation, and progress on a major gas pipeline project. The visiting dignitary also called on Pakistan's Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, at the general headquarters. According to the military's media wing, Lavrov acknowledged Pakistan's efforts for peace in the region, particularly in Afghanistan. It quoted the foreign minister as saying the ties between the two countries are on a positive trajectory and will continue to develop in multiple domains. In his remarks, the army chief said Pakistan has no hostile designs towards any country and will keep on working towards a regional framework based on mutual progress. In Myanmar, at least 8 anti-coup protesters have been shot dead by security forces in Sagaing region. More than 20 others were wounded. The violence erupted as troops entered the protest site in the town of Kale. Meanwhile, Indonesia says the UK will support ASEAN in its effort to resolve the Myanmar crisis. Elsewhere, China said another of its factories in Yangon have been burnt. Official estimates put the property damage at above $1 million. According to a local advocacy group, 581 civilians have been killed following the first February coup. Iran has confirmed an attack on its cargo ship in the Red Sea, suspected to have been carried out by Israel. A spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry said the explosion occurred on Tuesday and caused minor damage with no casualties. In a statement, spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said the civilian ship was stationed there to secure the region against pirates. According to a report by the New York Times, the attack was carried out by Israel, keeping U.S. interests in mind. Meanwhile, Pentagon spokesperson Commander Jessica McNulty said no U.S. forces were involved in the incident. A Pakistan Navy warship has arrived in Iran's Bandar Abbas port. The Navy's media wing said the visit aims to enhance regional peace and security. It said the PNS Azmat was received by the Iranian naval officers and Pakistan's diplomatic officials. The warship also took part in a passage exercise with the Iranian Navy. The mission commander of the Pakistan Navy met the Iranian civil and military officials. He conveyed the good wishes of the naval chief Admiral Mohammad Amjad Khan Niazi to the people of Iran. World powers and Iran have agreed to form working groups to discuss Washington sanctions in a bid to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. At a news briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson called the meeting with the deal signatories in Vienna as a constructive.
Ned Price said it is a potentially useful step as the U.S. seeks to determine what Iranians are prepared to do to return to compliance. U.S. delegation head Rob Malley said indirect talks would be about identifying the steps that Washington and Tehran are going to have to take. In response, Iran's chief negotiator Abbas Araghchi says Washington must lift all sanctions. He said Tehran will resume its nuclear compliance only after verifying this. Araghchi added he doubts the U.S. has the same seriousness as Iran regarding the matter. Meanwhile, China called on the U.S. to lift all sanctions and Iran to comply with the deal. The Russian envoy to Vienna said the two working groups, one on Iran and one on the U.S., have already begun their efforts. The next meeting will be held on Friday.
In the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, police have banned media from covering the inhumane cordon and search operations. The Indian-occupied forces use these operations to commit extrajudicial murders of innocent, unarmed Kashmiris. In a statement, the police chief asked media not to interfere in the duty of armed forces at the operation site. Meanwhile, Indian troops have launched so-called search operations in Srinagar, Shopian, and other areas of the territory. The occupying forces conducted house-to-house searches. The operation was still going on till the last reports came in. The Arab coalition says it has destroyed an explosive land drone launched by the Houthi rebels. In a statement, the coalition said the drone was aimed at the Saudi city of Khamis Mushahid. The coalition said attempts by Houthis to target civilians and populated areas constituted war crimes. It said coalition forces are taking operational measures to protect civilians in line with the international humanitarian law. Hostilities between Houthis and the Arab-led coalition have increased recently, while the international community has ramped up efforts to bring an end to the 6-year-long war in Yemen. In Brazil, more than 4,000 have died from COVID-19 overnight, registering yet another record number. India has reported 630 deaths and this year's highest infections, as over 115,000 people tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.8 million lives and infected over 132 million. More on the pandemic in this report.
The coronavirus crisis, lingering on for about 15 months now, is aggravating socio-economic difficulties across the world. Canada's Prime Minister says the country is facing a very serious third wave as its most populous province struggles to respond to rising cases. In the United States, White House spokesperson said Washington will not back a system that requires Americans to carry vaccine credentials. This comes as President Joe Biden moved up the vaccine eligibility target for all adults to April 19th, 2 weeks earlier than May 1st. In South America, medical students came to the streets against the lack of vaccines in Venezuela, while Peruvian doctors protested over work conditions. As Brazil's death toll approaches 337,000, experts term country's crisis as biological Fukushima.
Brazil is the epicenter of COVID-19 pandemic globally, and the World Health Organization recognizes this. Forecasts by some epidemiological institutes show that probably before July 1st, Brazil will surpass the 500,000 mark of COVID-19 deaths, rapidly approaching the total number of deaths of the United States, the country that had the highest absolute number of deaths.
Europe's drug regulator says it has not yet reached a conclusion over AstraZeneca, after a senior official from the agency said there was a link between the Oxford vaccine and blood clotting. Germany's drug maker CureVac says global supply chains for making COVID-19 vaccines have been disrupted by US restrictions. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has again condemned the unavailability of vaccines to a number of countries.
Scaling up production and equitable distribution remains the major barrier to ending the acute stage of this pandemic. It is a travesty that in some countries health workers and those at-risk groups remain completely unvaccinated.
Australia says it will ask the European Union to release more than 3 million AstraZeneca's doses, testing Brussels claim it is not blocking shipments.
Meanwhile, the death toll from COVID-19 in Pakistan has topped 15,000 as it reported more than 100 daily deaths again. The health ministry recorded 102 fatalities and more than 4,000 new infections overnight. The caseload has surpassed 700,000, out of which more than 620,000 people have recovered. The ministry said the country's positivity ratio stands at 9.6%. At present, there are over 64,000 active cases in the country. More than 3,800 are critical. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the world has entered the fourth industrial age. He was addressing the 10th virtual D8 summit hosted by Bangladesh. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Pakistan is committed to vision and objectives of the D8. Prime Minister Imran Khan will lead Pakistan's delegation on the 8th of April. The D8 was established in 1997 to promote economic and development cooperation among 8 member states. This year's summit will adopt a roadmap for the next 10 years. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will hand over the chairmanship of the forum to Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says his main concern is to lift the people of his country out of poverty. Khan held a meeting in Islamabad with members of the United Nations Development Program. Speaking at the launch of UNDP's Pakistan Human Development Report, Khan said Islamabad will be approaching the International Monetary Fund for assistance, given the challenges posed by COVID-19. He said despite Pakistan's economy moving in the right direction, authorities see disruptions ahead. The Prime Minister said the service sector has been badly affected and will require incentive packages. Khan said the UNDP report will help Islamabad directly subsidize the population, which is in need of financial assistance. Malaysia's former Prime Minister is served with a bankruptcy notification for failing to pay more than $400 million in unpaid taxes. In a Facebook post, former Premier Razak Najib said that authorities issued the notice on Monday, shortly after his hearing appeal. He described the move as an attempt to destroy his political career, as he will lose his seat in Parliament if he declared bankrupt. He said the timing of the notice was linked to last month's decision by his political party to stop cooperating with the ruling party in upcoming elections. Najib is facing dozens of corruption and money laundering charges over the suspected theft of billions of dollars from the 1MDB, but he has denied wrongdoing and launched a court appeal to set his aid of conviction. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Russia says Ukraine's rhetoric over admission into NATO will further destabilize southeastern Donbas region. At a press briefing, a Kremlin spokesperson said Ukraine's membership is unacceptable for the residents of the region. Dmitry Peskov said so far there is no intention by the Ukrainian side to calm down and move away from belligerent topics. He added President Vladimir Putin has raised the issue with France and Germany. This comes after Ukraine called on NATO to hasten its membership of the Western Military Alliance. Meanwhile, Defense Department spokesperson John Kirby said Moscow should clarify its intentions on troops buildup of Ukraine border. Moscow has also announced the start of 4,000 military drills across Russia in April. The massive exercises come amid increased tensions between Moscow and Kiev over Donbas. Amnesty International says Russian Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny is imprisoned in conditions that may slowly kill him. Amnesty's Secretary General Agnes Kalamard said Russian authorities are violating Navalny's rights. Kalamard also said Moscow may be seeking to hide what is being done to Navalny. In an interview, she said authorities are imposing prison conditions that amount to torture. Navalny announced a hunger strike last week to protest the inadequate medical care in the prison. He was handed a jail term in February after a court ruled that he violated parole for a fraud conviction. In the U.S., witnesses in Derek Chauvin's murder trial say the neck restraint during George Floyd's arrest was unauthorized. Police trainer Lieutenant Johnny Mersel said officers are trained to use the least amount of force necessary. Mersel said a neck restraint is authorized only when the suspect is actively and aggressively resisting. Talking to the jurors, he said the police officers are cautioned to be mindful of the neck area. This comes a day after the city's police chief testified that Chauvin violated department's rules and ethics. The 19-year-old police veteran Chauvin has pleaded not guilty to charges of murder and manslaughter. The International Monetary Fund says China's economy is projected to expand by 8.4% in 2021. The latest World Economic Outlook forecast marked the country's strongest growth rate since 2011. The figure is 0.3 percentage points above IMF's earlier prediction. The IMF said effective containment measures facilitated China's return to the pre-COVID GDP in the year 2020. It said many other developing economies are not expected to do so until 2023. The fund noted its forecast for China is much higher than the other major economies, including the United States. The Monetary Fund also projected that the global economy will grow by 6% in 2021. In National Basketball Association, the Golden State Warriors rallied in the second half to narrowly edge the Milwaukee Bucks 122-121 in San Francisco. Stephen Curry scored 41 points to help the Warriors snap a three-game losing streak. Kelly Oubre Jr. recorded 19 points for the Warriors, while Kent Bazemore added 18. The Bucks missed their leading scorer and rebounder Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was injured out due to injury. Meanwhile, Atlanta Hawks beat New Orleans Pelicans 123-107 to bag their fourth straight win. Atlanta's Trae Young recorded 30 points and added 12 assists. In other fixtures, Los Angeles Lakers defeated Toronto Raptors 110-101. China says attempts to politicize sporting events are against the spirit of the Olympic Charter. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson said it also undermines the interests of athletes and the international Olympic cause. In a news briefing, Zhao Lijian said China is ready to work with all parties to make Beijing 2022 Olympic a remarkable event. The remarks come after U.S. State Department denied considering a joint boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics. In a clarification statement, the department said U.S. position on the Beijing Olympics has not changed. It added Washington has not discussed and is not discussing any boycott with allies and partners. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.